I had what I thought was the funniest Democrat on. I don't say, well, it must have been within the last week or so. A lot of stuff happened, and we'll talk about it happen in the House here with the one law, one judge decreeing something. And I have this Democrat on, and I said, wow, have things changed now? I think I used the phrase, the worm has turned. And he said, what do you mean, Al? I said, well, we'll talk about what we're going to chat about. And he said, hey, we had a power sharing agreement. We thoroughly expect the Republicans to honor the power sharing agreement, and nothing's going to change. Straight face, this cat said that. I'm like, wait a minute. Until a judge said you cheated,
Right.
that was, you tell me, judge comes out and says, guy did not live in the neighborhood. He's out. What is going on, and how did things change, and how many calls did you get?
Quite a few calls, and things have changed. The particulars of how it's going to pan out is to be determined in terms of, once we get past the new year here and actually start digging in for leading up to session, we'll find out how this is all going to shake out. But I'll tell you this, it's absolutely ridiculous to claim that a power sharing agreement based upon power that is no longer shared is something that should stand, and trying to pitch it as some sort of like exercise in honor when these
was,
when these people ended the legislative session by breaking all of their own rules when they stood by Nicole Mitchell
I don't want to talk
after
about
she
that.
was caught in her stepmother's basement burglarizing the joint. I mean, these people don't get to talk about honor, and it's a flawed argument on its own
Oh,
terms. There is no
it's
power to share. We have the majority right now.
Well, it's just funny. Well, we expect them to honor that thing. It's like, well, until a judge
Right.
says you cheated. Now, let me ask you this, because I don't know. First thing you see, this judge comes out and says this guy in Little Canada didn't actually live in the district, so he's thrown out. Can't do it. Why? Because I maybe this is everyone says we got to have a new election. You're going to have a new election set up. Why is that? The Democrats put in somebody who wasn't following the rules. The judge says you weren't following the rule, pull you over here. Why is it all
Right.
of a sudden we have to have a new election? The guy who didn't cheat, the guy who lived in the district, had the most votes in this thing, and maybe there are three people I don't know how many people are on the ballot in that district, probably only two. Why does it not just go to the next guy who followed the rules? Why does he now have to go up against? And my point is, they're not out anything. The Democrats aren't out anything. If the judge had ruled their way, they
Yeah.
win. They put in a
Right.
new guy. They go in a district that's 65-35. They're going to win. What was the penalty other than this guy gets a little embarrassed, but he comes across like he's not that embarrassed. Like he doesn't really give a crap. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
live here.
Well,
What's your problem?
I can't walk you through the constitutional and or statutory reasons for
All right.
why it has to result in a special election. But what I will say is at minimum, and this goes back to that ridiculous comment that you cited from whoever this Democrat was who you had on, at minimum, the consequences are they now are in a
Got it.
temporary, albeit minority, and they're going to have to suffer the consequences of that. And it's entirely proper and appropriate and good and right for them to have to endure that. Look, you can't tell me the only two things are possible, right? Either they're so incompetent that they didn't know that this guy
Yeah.
didn't live in the district, or they did know. In either way, you bear the responsibility for either your lack of competence or your going along with something that you knew was illegal and wrong.
See, this is funny. They had to have known. You giving them the bone.
Yeah.
They had to have known because I had heard that there's a guy running up there that may not live in the district when it was all the little shadowy figures were going on. They had to know. There was an article written about it. No one followed it. They knew.
Right.
They knew enough. The Republicans knew. They scouted out the place. I mean, people knew. It's the not caring that drives me nuts. They didn't care.
Well, and that's exactly right. And again, I go back to the end of the 2024 legislative
Yeah.
session where they but most definitely knew that they were breaking all of their own rules and
Yeah.
completely just obliterating the state constitution and the way they were conducting the end of that session. These folks are shameless, truly shameless, to the point where they will come on and be like, "What do you mean, Al?" They'll feign ignorance. I saw
Well,
that on the House floor too when we were debating things like the trans refugee bill. They'd pretend they didn't know things, and
well,
it's like,
I can't wait to talk about the 8 senators that are now reaching across the aisle. Let's see if they still reach
yeah,
across now that the things have changed. But let me ask you this.
right,
So Lisa Dameth, presumably, unless you're going to run for it, she's going to get the speakership, right? That's like a foregone conclusion. So she gets it.
I would say that's a fair bet. Yeah.
I would put my money on it. I'm nothing against you, sir. If you want to run, let me know. I'll put my money. I'll hedge my bets. But then, do you now? I presume since this has happened, the group have gotten together and decided who's going to be in charge of what committees. That's kind of, you all know where you're heading when you get there.
So, and I'm not in the negotiating room when they were
Okay.
talking about this power sharing
Yeah,
situation. I'll tell you what I understand of it. Okay. So,
that's what.
what
Okay.
I understand of it is that as far as they got in terms of negotiating power sharing was determining what the committee structure would look like. So when there was going to be 67-67, and that was the expectation, we had co-chairs and co-vice chairs and equal numbers of
Yeah.
Democrats and Republicans on each committee. After this, there is the opportunity for a Speaker Dameth to, utilizing her rightful authority under the law
Yeah.
and according to the rules of our House, be able to restructure the committees to look more like what we would normally
Yeah.
expect them to look like. Now, that said, it still requires 68 votes to pass anything off the House floor. So the Democrats haven't lost all of their power here,
Well,
but
no,
they've taken a ding, and they should have.
but this is, and again, maybe you'll tell me again. I'll write it down. I remember. Is it Fatah or Fateh, the senator that kind of held down the world at the end of
Yeah.
session last time because he wanted the Uber driver thing he done? That was like
Yep.
his
Yep.
whole thing.
Yeah.
One
And now
guy
he's running
stopped
for
the
mayor
world.
of Minneapolis. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm not ripping. I want to call it the Fateh move if that's how you pronounce the name. I don't even know.
Right.
I don't care.
The
But this
Fateh
move,
maneuver.
yeah. Well, here's my beauty. This is me. You have on the House side now 67, 134
Yeah.
Fatehs. Every
Yeah.
one of them has the power to pull what he pulled. And I don't mean this in bad. He did what
Right.
he did and he got what he wanted. This is politicians. It's a big time game. Do you not have 67, 67 on each side? Every one of them have the opportunity to do that exact same move. Is anything possible to get done? You have to get to 68. Someone has to fold or nothing gets passed.
Well, it's a little bit different, right? So in the Omar Fatah situation
Fatah. I
at
got
the
to
end
write
of
it down.
session, and who knows, maybe we're both wrong in how we're pronouncing it.
Yeah.
But in that situation, he had a unique point of leverage because it was the end of the session. It was literally the second
Yep.
to last day that we were able to legally do business as a legislature. And by him not showing up, it made it impossible for them to pass their agenda. You can't do that same maneuver on January 14th, right? Like you're not going to be able to
Okay.
do that as a member of the House, just walking in and start making demands. Because if you don't show up, what it does is first of all, it gives the other
The other
side the
side.
opportunity to make maneuvers, certainly in committees, especially, but on the House floor, like any group of people, like I think what's more likely to happen is you're going to start to see formations of uncommon coalitions amongst
Okay.
Republicans and Democrats on certain issues. So it's probably not going to be a whole bunch of, 68, 65 votes. It'll probably be more along the lines of, in the 70s somewhere with a lot of stuff that ultimately ends up getting passed just because of the way the process is teed
Okay.
up to work.
Sometime they get the new vote back in. The Democrats win that seat because it's 65-35, no matter who they put it up there. It's back to 67-67. They don't have enough to change anything. That will be Speaker Damus for the year, right? As I understand the rules of the House, once you're in, you got to get 68 to get her out. So they aren't going to have enough
For,
to do that.
for the term, yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. And will she be able to, and this is get you in trouble with the boss, with the idea that it's 60, you have 67 and none can leave the reservation, if we pardon the expression, can she, that's like wrangling cats. Is she going to be able to pull that off and keep 67 Republicans in line to get what we have to get done? The budget, as an example.
Well, I mean, you talk about getting me in trouble with the boss. Like, I don't think that her position is any different than Speaker Hortman's was over the
Okay.
past term, where she had a slim majority to
All right.
work with and struggled mightily. And I think the task is to keep those struggles behind closed doors as much as possible, which the
Okay.
Democrats largely did, although
Yeah.
sometimes it became pretty evident what was going on the other side. But yeah, it's going to be a tough job, and it'd be a tough job for absolutely anybody.
Well, but well, except for me. This is going to make the greatest next 5 months of radio that'll just be falling on your lap and what can and can't get out. It'll be fine. Sir, 8 senators come out from the DFL side, weeks before this came down with the House being switched over. I go, truth and honesty, about 4 of them show up on this show on a regular basis. We like them. Good guys. But they're in districts that might have a couple of them, both the representatives and the House are now switched over to being Republican. You can see that it's an iffy spot they're in. So they reach out the olive branch to you guys and say, hey, we're willing to reach across the aisle. We're those blue dogs. I think you guys have such an opportunity to use that. Now, you can one of two ways. Go all out and force them to say no new taxes, force them to say something that they can't get behind because their party will get on them. Or you do the Al method. Kill them with 1,000 pinpricks. First thing we do, we come up with a rule. You know what? Al's tired that people can be under investigation for the Feeding Our Future scandal, and at the same time coming back at us and signing up for the autism scandal. If you're under suspicion in one, you can't make money until you clear your name. I think that'd be a great law. I don't know how the ADM could stand up against that. First law passed. They could not say, no, we really want people to steal from us twice, 3 times in a row. You know what I'm saying? You could go after the little things that there's no way in God's green earth they could go against and get some track record, or you go for something they can't live with and prove them to be not honest. That'd be the wrong way of saying it. You know my point? How do you use 8 guys who come out and said, we're on your side, kind of? How do you use it when it's this close?
Well, I think the first thing is you don't overthink it, right? So I've been presented with, I mean, as you might imagine, a number of clever ideas of how to maneuver the Democrats into tough positions. But I think that if that's your goal, first of all, I just think it's the wrong goal from like a legislative responsibility perspective. Like we're there to do the work to actually govern, to produce the laws and structure required to serve Minnesotans. But then also, I think you end up twisting yourself into knots over in terms of like what you're thinking about. I think the way to approach it is actually quite simple. What's the best thing to do? What's the best policy? And you propose that. And if they go along with it, if they like it and they vote for it, great, wonderful. If they don't, now you got to start asking yourself why. Yeah. And I think it really is as simple as that. Like, that's a good idea. What you articulated is a good idea.
That's very, very pristine of you, and God's a great world, and everybody's got, unicorns and rainbows. But this idea, and I blame all these scandals on 4 groups. There's bad people going to do bad things. They're out there, and that's not going to stop. We can do nothing about the bad people. Then there's lawmakers who write laws that are so open like this. I don't think it's common sense to say, guess what? 12 people in the autism scandal are currently under investigation for the Feeding Our Future. We can stop that. You don't write checks to bad people. Then they're the people that are writing the bad checks in the state of Minnesota. Feeding Our Future's example, 3,000 kids in the 3rd floor apartment getting fed that's crap. But we wrote the check anyway. No one got a strongly worded letter in there. The people we hired, I'm not ripping all of them, but there are people that didn't care. And then there's those of us that voted for all this, and we don't stop voting for it. That's the look in your face. You give me that look. It's all our fault, but until we fix it, that's why make this law. It's common sense crap they can't say no to because they're the ones who passed all this stuff and left it open for the people to steal from us. I'm sorry. It's not that hard, is it?
No, it's not. I share your frustration. I mean, I think an analogy would be like if you're going to sit there and say bad people are going to do bad things, okay, well, then I guess we should shut down the Department of Public Safety if that's your rationale. Well,
you didn't get my point. You write any law, someone's going to try to steal from you. I get it. You just don't make it so easy that you could just sign up.
Well, and you also don't abandon the concept of justice. And I'm not talking about social justice. I'm talking about actual justice, right? So again, to use a criminal law analogy, being in a situation where you can't defend yourself in your own home, being in a situation where if you do defend somebody else out in public, like this Daniel Penny thing that happened in New York, you're the one who gets prosecuted. Meanwhile, Biden's letting out all the criminals. Like that environment makes it easy on the bad people to do bad things. And we're seeing an analogous situation with this fraud.
I go back the autism thing. My barber has to have a license to cut my hair. And I was standing after this came out. I said, you cut my hair bad twice. I'm not coming back. You cut my ear. I'm not coming back. We will weed out the bad barbers of the world, But you don't need a license to be an autism correction center. You just got to open your door and say, I'm helping kids. And some autistic kids got to find out whether you're getting good service or not. Who comes up with this? I'm sorry. Good God.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell where the left-wing Democratic grifts are because they're the least regulated industries on earth. Okay. The abortion industry,
Yeah. Yeah.
all this cornucopia benevolence that they
Yeah.
provide with all these nonprofits.
Yeah.
Those are the areas that because nobody's looking, nobody's watching, there's no accountability, nobody ever gets fired. That's where the grifting
Yeah.
is.
And again, it's just that easy. You just look at it. What God gets me, and I have 30 seconds if you would. How come the people in Minnesota continue to put up with it? I'm sitting here so mad. I had friends over, my wife's friends, and we got chatting into this, and on all sides of the spectrum, I can't believe they do that. Really? And it's like, this is what's, are we not paying attention? Millions and millions of dollars.
No, I don't think we are putting up with it. The analogy that I use is that the wind is blowing very strong right now in our direction politically. The
Okay.
question is, as a Republican Party, do we have the wherewithal to erect a sail to catch that wind and take us where
Okay.
we need to go? And that's an open question going into 2025.
And we will see what happens. This is good for me, and I'm the only one in the state. This is a gold mine. There, I don't know what happens with 67, 66, and 3 and 34 and 1 and the Catwoman going to trial. All I know is I got lots to talk about. Walter Hudson, I love having you on the program, Representative. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
We'll get you back on.